Well, hello again and welcome back to my happy place. Today is Friday, June 4th, 2021, and this is episode number 20 in my Sew Your Stash series. And today I'm excited to show you how to make this sparkler block. Now, this is the sparkler block right here, and I've made it into my 4th of July flag. And my 4th of July flag and the sparkler block, when I first designed these back in 2018, I designed them for my vintage block along. Now that takes place on my blog. That was a sew along that I started on New Year's Eve in 2018, and then I went through the whole year long and did tutorials on vintage blocks. And where those vintage blocks came from is my grandma's pattern basket that she gave me. As you know, my grandma taught me how to quilt, and her sisters, and I ended up with a great big basket of my grandma's patterns. And I'm sure that a lot of my great-grandmother's patterns were in there because she's the one who taught all of her daughters how to quilt. And so I have all of these vintage patterns from, you know, newspapers, hand drawings, just all these different things that have been passed back and forth, and probably some of those patterns were even from my great aunts too. I don't know, but anyway, Grandma gave them to me because, you know, she knew that I, you know, loved to quilt and had my quilting company, and so before she passed away, she gave these patterns to me. So a lot of these patterns from vintage times, like that came in the newspaper and things like that, are hard to duplicate now in rotary cutting. You have to kind of change them up a little bit, or you can do them exactly the same, but you have to rotary cut them and kind of do different measurements, because again, back then they would just take cardboard and make templates and trace around them, and they would just take a piece of fabric, you know, put the piece of cardboard on there, like on the wrong side, trace around it, and that's where they would cut from with scissors. Nowadays we have rotary cutters, rulers, mats, all these wonderful things, which by the way Grandma thought was awesome. And so what I did was I went through the patterns that I most remember her sewing. I started with those and I transferred those into measurements for rotary cutting. And so I have many more patterns in there that I didn't even use, but I just had to stop at the point of making this huge quilt. So you saw that quilt in the opening. And so I'm just going to insert a slideshow in here of, you know, more close-ups of that quilt. Okay, so that was a peek at my vintage block along quilt, which by the way still does remain on my blog, and it will remain on there for a little while. And so what I did was, again, just took tutorials and took blocks and redesigned them, or kept them exactly as close as I could if we could rotary cut them, and drew them up and did a tutorial on my blog. So this block was called the sparkler block, and I did that for 1 week and did it in scrappy colors for my stash. And then the next week I knew I was going to put it into a flag, and because Grandma was very patriotic, she was born on July 24th, which is a holiday here in Utah, and it's our Utah birthday. And so I just recolored it so that the star could be the blue and white in for the flag. And so I've had a lot of requests about this flag because a lot of people have been showing it on their YouTube. And so I said, yes, I'll do another tutorial, even though there is a tutorial on my blog, and I will link to that. So here's the sparkler block. It finishes at 7 inches. Right now it's 7.5 inches. And I'm just going to show you how to sew this block. It may look complicated, but it's really simple. I'm going to show you an even simpler way. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can sew blocks, but I've really even simplified this, so it's kind of fun to put together. And then I'll show you how I put it together into a flag, and then I have another fun little bonus block after that I did. So what we have is laid out on my design board. I've kind of pre-sewn some things together for you, but before we talk about that, I did write down the cutting. Even though this is in my blog, I thought if I write it down right here and Cassidy films it, you can take a screenshot or you can copy it down, copy the cutting that you need. So this cutting up here is just for the 7-inch sparkler block, and then here's the flag stripes cutting, and then here's the Patriot block that I will show you. And all right, so what I've done is I've taken the 2-inch squares and I've sewn them together into a 4-patch. Now you could use the same background if you want for all of these squares, but I like to do something different because I just kind of like how it adds texture to the block, and it's kind of fun to put a little bit of red in there, I think, to go with the stripes. And so what I did was sew these together like this. Now this print that I used, I wanted to show you real quick. This is from my Farm Girl Vintage fabric, and I just wanted to show you that I'm not worrying about direction here. It's not a directional fabric. See this fabric? It's just, it goes all different ways. And so I just kind of cut it out, fussy cut it so that I didn't get these great big words, but just the smaller words. And then just made sure that I cut those straight so that they go across straight. So now, that's enough about the fabric. Okay, so once these are done, and then I've just sewn the rectangles together here that form this. Now that these are done, I can go ahead and add 3 easy corner triangles. See, 1, 2, 3. With this stack of the blue 2-inch squares that I have left. Doing it this way makes it so much easier, it's faster, and it's more accurate. Otherwise, these would have to be half square triangles first and then sewn together. This way, I simply just sew a 4-patch, press the seams open, and then I'm just adding easy corner triangles. Not on the blue, obviously, because this is already blue, but blue, blue, blue on all of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll lay it back out on here and we'll continue on. Now I'm following the center line here on my Seams Sew Easy guide, and that way I don't have to mark on the background. If you don't have one of these, you can mark a line on each one of these from corner to corner, and you sew right on that line. All right, so now I've got these 4 corners ready to go. And see how fast that was doing it that way? We didn't have to mess with half square triangles first. You can't do that for every block, but I like to do that for all the blocks that I can that have the half square triangles on the outside sections. Okay, so now it's just basically turned into a 9 patch, and gonna sew this row, this row, this row, and then sew those 3 rows together, and then we'll end up with our blocks. So let's get sewing. All right, here we go. Wasn't that easy peasy? I love sewing this block. This is fun. And if you go onto my blog, when I leave you the link, you'll see what it looks like when I do the scrappy one. And you know, it's in the quilt. You can probably find it in the quilt there. But this is what the back looks like. So I pressed the 4 patches open, and then I just pressed all of the easy corner triangles towards the triangle. And then when I sewed these sections together, I pressed towards these little rectangle sections here. I pressed all the seams towards that. And you know, you could continue pressing it all open, but I think because of how this block is constructed, it's good half and half, which is what I do a lot. Okay, so once you have this block, again, it measures 7.5 inches now, and it will measure 7 inches when you put it into the flag. So for the flag stripes, what I did is, again in the cutting, I cut 1.5 inch wide stripes, and then these are 13 inches long. Then I just go ahead and sew that to make the flag. And then I have this one constructed this way, and this measures 20.5 inches long, and then I just sew it to the bottom. And I end up with this flag right here. And then what I did with this, and I made this back when I did the vintage block along, I made an extra block, and so that I hang it on my wall. And I just quilted it, and see, I just quilted using a walking foot on my Bernina, and I just did it like 1/8 of an inch away from the seams on both sides, and then just kind of quilted around here. And then I just bound it with my chicken tracks. I put some backing on it. This is for my vintage Happy 2 collection, and it's fun. It makes a cute wall hanging, placemat, whatever. I think it looks fabulous in the quilt as well, and I think it would be fabulous making this into a whole quilt, an entire quilt. of just scrappy reds and denims and whites. Now, another thing that I did with this that I'm going to make a pillow out of is I made this block that I'm calling Patriot. See, isn't that fun? So what I did with that is I just, again, made the sparkler block, and then I grabbed, here, I put this on a design board. Okay, so then I cut 7.5 inch long by 1.5 inch wide strips and made 4 of those, sewed them around, and cut 3.5 inch squares for the corners. Now you could either do them blue corners like I did, or you could do them red. Let's see what that looks like. Let me just cover those up, sort of, kind of gives you an idea of what it would look like if you decided to choose red, which would be cute too. And what I'm going to do is just add some more background fabric. I'm probably going to use this fabric. I'm going to add a couple of inches all the way around the outside so that I can fit it into a pillow form and make a pillow for my deck for the 4th of July. Right now it measures 13.5 inches, and it'll measure 13 inches finished. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of background around it so that I can probably fit it into an 18-inch pillow form. And so this is the Patriot block, this is the sparkler block, and this is my 4th of July flag block. And so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today. I hope that you're inspired to grab your red, white, and blue scraps and from your scrappy stash bins and sew up a flag or a block. And thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll chat with you later.